and I've had a delightful time here in California. I remarried while I was here to Anne, my wife of 26 years, and collectively we have 7 children and are having a great time with 14 grandchildren at this point also. So that's kind of the background. I was born in Philadelphia in a suburb called Chestnut Hill, in a hospital there, and grew up primarily in that area. Went to boarding school in Vermont, a school called Putney in southern Vermont for 5 years. I guess they wanted to get me out of the house for whatever reason. And that was a wonderful experience. And then World War II came in 1939. And I recall as a young boy then becoming aware of it because relatives from England were visiting my grandfather, and they were terribly concerned with what was happening. And also in school, at that time, there were isolationists and those who wanted to have greater support for the English and French and who were the Allies. And so there was sort of a dichotomy. After that, joined the ERC, Enlisted Reserve Corps, as a way to assure that I could have one summer or semester of school at the University of Virginia, where I was accepted. Following that, I entered in the ASTP. That was the program. And we trained at Fort Benning. ASTP is Army Specialized Training Program. Its purpose after that was to insert us back into schools of various kinds, to learn more specialties that might allow us to become leaders in the military. So when Secretary of War Stinson abolished the program, and we had interestingly been warned by our sergeant in training at Fort Benning, you guys think you're just going to some college or not, but you may not be. A critical time that something really happened was D-Day, which was in June of 1944. And it became real to us that we were going to be part of a military program, most likely in Europe. We finished our training in September of that year, and we were shipped over to Liverpool, Scotland, on the Queen Elizabeth. There were 14,500 soldiers on that ship, and we went solo to get across the ocean for the purpose of avoiding submarines. If you went in a flotilla, you were a sitting target. The Queen Elizabeth did a wonderful job of getting troops into England first, and then letting them transfer later over to France by different carriers and things. And I think partly because there was some concern. Our average age was 19 years for that division. I was 18 at the time, or just had turned 19. And so we got to do some sort of make work while we were in England for about 6 weeks. We were in Congleton, we were up in Hereford, and various places, and we still had training. I was trained then to become in the mortar section, 60 millimeter mortars. So we were just, the war ended in May of 45. We dropped a bomb in August, I think, and there were so many of us left that they set up a point system on how long it would take for you to get home based on the number of months that you were serving overseas. For me, I was about 12 months and ended up being 18 months before I left in March of 1946. We were still such young kids. I remember going to a bar in Georgetown, Washington with a friend of my mother's who said, "Why don't you come down and we'll have a drink or something?" And the bartender looked at me and he said, "How old are you?" I said, "I'm 20. He said, "I can't serve you." And I remember thinking, my God, I've been to war over here and I've done all this stuff and they won't serve me a drink. I was furious. The only other thing we did was sort of horrified the families. Because when we left the armed forces, they had a sort of, the training to leave was one indoctrination, where this young man would get up and he'd assemble us all in a room. He'd say, now what I want you fellas to realize, when you leave here, you're not going to get free meals or things anymore, and you got to think and find things for your place. But there's a deal. Uncle Sam has something called the 2020 Club. So if you go down and sign up, you're going to get $20 a week for 20 weeks. And then you got another little pin you can wear showing that you're collecting this if you want. So when I got back to Philadelphia, I went down, and it sort of horrified everybody that you're going to collect unemployment? What are you doing? You know, you have a home here. But we thought, no, this is something we should do. And I was fortunate. My father belonged to a golf club, so I started to take up golf a little bit. And then I became very good friends because the caddies were all veterans also. And we all ended up in the same place collecting our $20. So we all became pretty equal people at that point. And that pretty much sort of wrapped up the whole war experience. And, I think the value, the first thing you want to do when you leave something like that is you want to forget it. And so we went back. I had a chance then to go back to the University of Virginia in the summer of 1946, and I wanted to finish that education. So what would have normally taken 4 years, I did in 3, because they had 3 semesters each year that were the equivalent of a year and a half. And so I was able to graduate by 1949, which was just 2 years off the mark in terms of the original schedule, and then go on with life and go to work. And the focus of younger people at that time was not on the past. They just wanted to forget it, and we did pretty much. Later in life, somehow the memories sort of reoccur, and the funny thing that happened was when my mother died, my cousin and my sister were going through some papers, and they found this letter that I'd written to my father. And so I sent it into the 87th Division, but before I did, I checked because the headline on it was how my combat buddy saved my life. John Cottingham was his name, and I called him. I said, John, I'm sending you a copy of this letter. Do you remember it the way I did? And what had happened there was we were digging this foxhole on the top of this hill in the snow, and the shells were coming in around us, and we'd just broken through the crust of frozen earth underneath the snow, and we're starting to get down, and John said, I think we ought to go over to that tree. And it was about 20, 30 feet away, like that tree right there. I said, why? We just got down here. He said, no, I think it's going to be better digging under the tree because the ground won't be frozen so much. So we moved, we left the mortar where it was in the hole, and we looked up, there was some more shells came in, and we were digging away over there, and a German artillery shell smashed in and crushed the mortar into a wrangled piece of junk. And that's where we would have been sitting if Johnny had not made me move. And so those are kind of the funny coincidences of life. The other one is kind of, do you get religion? And I recall that same day in the snow there, and I looked up at the sky and said, God, if you're up there, please get me out of here alive. And so I've always kind of, whether it was a divine thing or just whatever happened, I've always felt, well, there is some greater power around somehow that can affect you, even though fate is such a large part of it, but it's how you react to it, I think. And then from there, life went on, and here I am at age almost 79, enjoying it very much.